And a happy Monday to everybody. Thank you for being here. It is Memorial Day here in the United States. I don't know where everyone in the world is when they're watching this, but this is a day, some places it's called Decoration Day, or used to be called that, where they would go out and decorate the graves of ancestors. I think it started in the South with the decoration of Confederate soldiers on their graves. But this is what around this time of year is when people go out and decorate the graves, and eventually became Memorial Day, just to honor all those soldiers who have given their lives in service of the country, and we appreciate all those. My dad's a veteran. I'm a veteran wannabe. I'd wanted to go into the military originally, but was disqualified because of medical reasons. So here we are. But anyway, thank you to all the veterans out there and currently active duty personnel who are serving in the United States military, wherever you may be. Thank you and your families too, for the sacrifices that y'all have made for our own freedoms. And so as we're getting into this, we are continuing on our study today for Monday, May the 26th. Hit that subscribe bar and then the notification bell when it comes up so you can be notified when content gets added to the channel. Comment, like, share. Yeah, you know the drill. Check out my Substack page. I've got one over there where I am publishing at least once a week. I try to do, if I can, more than that. I've got one that I'll be posting later today or tomorrow. Got a little more editing to do on it. And if you'd like to support this ministry, I'm going to be making some changes in the ministry and how I'm doing my work. I'll be announcing those here probably in about a week or so. And if you'd like to help support this ministry financially, check out my Patreon page over there for an offer for a couple of the books that I have written. And you can also do a monthly support if you like. I'm still trying to think of something to offer for exclusive content and a way to do that. So anyway, I'm chewing on some of that. Anyway, we are studying this book, 10 Questions Every Christian Must Answer. Coming out of chapter 3 today, we're going to look at part 1. Alex McFarland wrote this particular chapter. There's two authors of the book, Elmer Towns and Alex McFarland. They each wrote different chapters. I don't think there's one that they collaborated on. I think they're all individual. I'm not sure about that. I don't remember. I'm rereading the book actually as we go along. I first read this book, it was back before COVID. And it sat on the shelf for a while, and we're studying it in an adult class at church, and I thought I would do it here as well. And for these studies, we're not just reading the book. I'm supplementing portions of it with outside material that I have gleaned from other research that I have done. And then, as I always say, I'm not getting any kind of royalties, compensation, any kind of consideration from the author or publishers of the book. This is simply because I like the material, I'm interested in it, I like the book, and so that's why we're studying through it. There's even a few areas where I might occasionally take issue with them. So with all that in mind, let's go on. Now, chapter 2, kind of recapping, we talked about the cosmological argument, which is a cause and effect, that there had to be an ultimate first cause to everything in the universe that we see. Teleological argument, yeah, that's easy for you to say. Teleos with end comes from the Greek word for end, which suggests that there was a specific purpose to the universe being created. It had a specific purpose in mind or an end to it. And those are going to be dealt with more thoroughly here in chapter 3. I'm not real sure why they divided it up the way they did. The two, teleological and cosmological, I think could have been separate chapters unto themselves, but I didn't write the book or publish it, so it wasn't my call. Now, on page 33, here's where McFarland quotes from Immanuel Kant, the German or Austrian philosopher, about two things that fill the mind with awe. The oftener and more steadily we reflect on them, the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. Now, we're going to talk about the moral law a little bit later, but looking up on a starry night and seeing all the stars and seeing all the creation, it should cause us all to stop and wonder, hey, what's up there? There's got to be something more than this. Yeah, I know there's problems with immoral behavior, bad behavior, and evil things that people try to use to argue against God. We'll look at those a little bit later on in the study. So Kant goes on to say, this leads to the ultimate question: do the facts as best understood lead to the conclusion that there is a supernatural creator of God, or by God is meant a being who is the personal, immaterial, timeless cause of the universe, the designer and sustainer of the universe, and the ground of moral reality. Christians believe that the existence of God is a reasonable inference, defensible, based on these four features of reality. This isn't, I think I attributed this to Kant, to Immanuel Kant. This isn't really him. This is McFarland speaking here. See, Christians believe in the existence of God as a reasonable inference. Number one, you have the coming into existence of the universe. I don't know of any physical law that says the universe could have existed forever. There's people who do believe it's somehow self-created or it existed forever, but given that the universe is within the physical realm, how is that possible? Then the current existence of the universe, we can infer from that there is a creator somewhere, the design of the universe, and then moral reality. And as I said, we will get into the whole moral reality a little bit later on. Our finite universe was created by an infinite being out of nothing, and that's ex nihilo is the Latin phrase, from nothing or out of nothing. And when we look at Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created, that is the idea there was nothing. It's hard for us to imagine because even an empty box is still full. It's got air in it, right? That was a trick question that a science teacher asked us in about the 6th or 7th grade. But there is something. You can't destroy matter. You can only change it. So if I take a block of wood, that's matter. I strike a match to it, it's converted into gases that still matter. The definition I remember from science class back in the day of matter is anything that has weight and takes up mass. Or has mass and takes up space. I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Has mass and takes up space. And air actually does. At sea level, you're at about 14.7 pounds per square inch of air. Now, the universe is not caused and couldn't have caused itself. Or rather, the universe is uncaused. There was a cause to it, and it could not create itself or cause itself any more than I could create myself. I had parents that created me, and here I am. Now, I can create myself in the sense of I might choose the occupation I go into and things that I do on a daily basis, but as far as my physical body, my DNA and all that, that came from parents. And so the design of the universe does point to a designer, just like any other structure, your house that you live in or your apartment, your car, all point to some kind of a creator or designer somewhere. Now, I always say, I don't know who designed this house. I know the family that owned this land that sold it to the church. The church moved. In fact, the house was built by the family the church bought the land from. It's been here for over 100 years. Now, there's some property not far from here that a member of the family owns. And I've actually talked to him a few times, and he's the one that told me about how old the house is. And if I wanted to know anything more about it, I could probably do the research and find out who designed the house, who built it, who did all the add-ons, if I wanted to take that time. And that is the universe around us had to have a creator somewhere. Now, who is that creator? Well, the universe itself doesn't tell us that. And that's where our own investigation has to come in, where we research, we study, and try to figure out the answer to that question. Now, here's some counterpoints that McFarland presents, or devil's advocate. You could probably look at this. Where the universe came to exist by Darwinian evolution, not through the intelligent designer, there are no scientifically legitimate reasons to reject evolution. This is what the atheists would tell us, that it somehow just evolved out of nothing. Now, I do see reasons to reject Darwinian evolution, but that's another discussion for another time. Intelligent design is not a good argument because it is not science, because it is not testable, does not use an observable entity, and is not predictable. Now, I'm not sure that evolution really is either, but that's another discussion for another time. And I think we do get into that in one of the later chapters. But even some Christians prefer to keep faith and science separate because we all know the Bible is not a science book. And that's true. It's not a science book, but it's not a history book. It's a collection of various kinds of literature, and it does contain truth in all of those areas. So then we're left with this question: where did it all come from? Where did the universe come from? Where did human intelligence come from? Of course, when you get to Washington, D.C., you have to wonder if there really is intelligence out there. It's an old joke that says there must be intelligent life in outer space. Why? Because you don't see them spending billions of dollars to find out if there's intelligent life down here. Point taken. So where did it all come from? Well, first is the point of the coming into existence of the universe. And that was the cosmological argument we looked at, which says it's got a cause, or rather it has an effect, so it must have had a cause, an action or an event, something occurs, and then you have the result. A is the cause, so B becomes the result. This goes back to Aristotle, who called this the unmoved mover or the prime mover. This is before Christ, so he wasn't a Christian. He was a Greek philosopher, oratician, or what they call him then, base orator. He was a speaker. He had a lot of students, and I believe Socrates was his student, and one of them, I think it was Aristotle, tutored Alexander the Great. I think I mentioned that in previous videos. And then we have Al-Ghazali, a theologian, a jurist, philosopher, polymath. The polymath, I had to look that up because Aristotle was also called a polymath. That's, in modern American English terms, we would call him a jack of all trades, very knowledgeable in a lot of different areas. And he coined, and as you can see, he's not a Christian, he's a Muslim, but he coined the Kalim argument, which is a subset to the cosmological argument. I had not heard of this till I read the book, 10 Questions Every Christian Must Answer. But when we are looking at the idea of a first cause, it's a cause. Remember, it's not an effect. And that's what God is. God is the cause of everything. This does present a bit of a problem sometimes, because in logic, this is called a special pleading. Basically, it's asking for a special rule for your argument for it to work. And addressing the special pleading argument is beyond the scope of this chapter that we're looking at. I'm reading from McFarland's notes, or from his chapter. But suffice it to say, McFarland says that it is not necessary anyway, because there's another form of the cosmological argument. And now we're getting into the Kalim argument. I think that's how you pronounce it. There actually is an accent mark over the second A, which I couldn't get on my computer keyboard. But basically, it's a syllogism. It says the universe began to exist. Whatever begins to exist has a cause for its existence, and therefore the universe has a cause for its existence, is basically what it's saying. It's something somewhere out there had to bring the universe into existence. So scientific evidence for the beginning of the universe. Well, there is a lot of evidence that it had a beginning somewhere. We don't know exactly when that beginning was, but there was one. Number one, the expanding universe. Secondly, the second law of thermodynamics. And then third, the Big Bang theory. Now, the Big Bang, I'll say more about that when we get to it, but we'll look at a couple of these other things. And this will be expanded over the next day or two, speaking of expansion. In maintaining the evidence for the expanding universe, scientists maintain that every object in the universe is moving away from every other object. The space itself is expanding, and this is what physicist George Gamow says: the entire space of the universe, populated by billions of galaxies, or if I'm being Carl Sagan, billions of galaxies. Terrible impression, I know. Is in a state of rapid expansion, with its members flying away from one another at high speed. And I think we did get that confirmed through the Hubble telescope when it was launched. When was that? The 1980s, I think, or 90s. I don't remember. And some say the universe could have been expanding from eternity. So in other words, it didn't have a beginning. But mathematically, this is not possible, because otherwise the universe would be infinitely dispersed, and it's not. So it began sometime at a finite point, thousands, millions, billions of years ago. I tend to lean young Earth, but I'm not a fanatic about it. In fact, I know of at least one, probably more, churches that when they ask questions about doctrine and beliefs on the Bible and that sort of thing, there's a couple of them that I've encountered that are definitely hardcore young Earth. I got asked by one, did humans and dinosaurs walk the Earth? I said, I don't know, I'm not that old. But I do know that there are some who try to make the case. I'm not really convinced one way or the other, to be honest with you. But I also realize that a lot of people who, when they start arguing about the age of the earth, I think, start with their conclusion and they work backwards. I think the atheist needs billions of years for everything to have evolved. So that's what he's starting with. Whereas the dyed-in-the-wool hardcore young earther is starting with his conclusion the earth is only 6 or 10,000 years old and working backwards that way. And with most extremes, the truth is somewhere in the middle. I like what Frank Turek says, and to paraphrase him, I am convinced that the universe is at least 93 years old, because if my mother were still with us, she'd be 93 this year. So it's at least that old. And then we have the second law of thermodynamics, which says all closed systems will tend toward a state of maximum disorder or entropy. In a closed system, the amount of energy available to do work decreases and becomes uniform. This amounts to saying that the universe is winding down. So in thinking of a large clock, a clockmaker may expand. In fact, I don't have I thought I had a clock on the next slide, and I don't. Clockmakers expends energy to wind up the clock, and the energy is stored in the spring. As the energy is slowly released, powering the clock, it is not replaced, and eventually it completely runs out unless the clockmaker breaks into the closed system and winds the clock. I guess another way to look at it is when you fill up your car with gasoline, you get on the highway, that gasoline gets used, converted to energy, moves the car forward. It can't be replaced until you stop and fill up the tank again. Once it's gone, it's gone. Or look at it as money. You go to lunch, you spend $20 at IHOP or at Cracker Barrel or wherever. That money's gone. And you can never use it for anything else. You got to replace that money in order to pay the light bill or buy something else or whatever it is you're going to do. So as implications from the second law of thermodynamics, the universe is constantly losing usable energy and it's not gaining any more. So it's only logical to conclude then that the universe is not eternal. And here's the clock illustration, the wind-up clock. The universe is winding down. At one point, it will be fully wound down. Just like at one point it was fully wound up, and here it's coming down unless some cosmic hand comes in and turns the crank and winds it up. I don't know if anybody still even uses wind-up clocks anymore. My grandmother had one that she called Big Ben. It was loud, and apparently it got her pulled over at customs coming into the States once from Europe. So, at least that's the story she told. So theologians are generally delighted with proof that the universe had a beginning. Astronomers are curiously upset. And this is Robert Jastrow quoted on page 38 of 10 questions every Christian must answer. Astronomers are curiously upset. It turns out that the scientist behaves the way the rest of us do when our beliefs are in conflict with the evidence. The laws of thermodynamics point to one conclusion: the universe had a beginning. And yeah, when beliefs get challenged or ideas get challenged, it can be uncomfortable, especially if you don't have an immediate answer. And that's one problem with doing debates and live shows is there's always the potential of a gotcha in there. That's why I do very little live. I record things, and one of the reasons why I don't do a lot of interviews. And on this sort of a topic, I don't think I've ever been interviewed. But if someone were to sit down live, there's always that possibility that they're going to try and hit you with a gotcha, where you couldn't answer the question there, so you must be foolish and dumb and all that. No, it just means I don't have an answer for you. Third reason behind the Kalim argument is the Big Bang Theory. Now, when I was in Bible school, I remember being told that the Big Bang Theory was pretty much going by the wayside, that nobody believed it anymore. It was being rejected, but I don't think that was the case, at least not now. I do think that there seems to be quite a bit of theoretical support anyway for the Big Bang Theory. Let me rephrase that there is support in the scientific, and I think to a certain extent in the theological community, to accept the Big Bang Theory or something like it, where things just, bang, in fact here, God spoke and bang, it happened. And if you look at Genesis 1 again, in the beginning God created, God from the text we can see spoke it into existence and created something out of nothing. So I see where that could make sense. Now, you can leave your comments in the comment section below. If you don't agree with that, that's fine. But I see where a bang where God said, okay, let there be light, let there be this, let there be that, and boom, 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 it's happening. Maybe he, at the same time, snapped his finger. Don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not that old. Feel it sometimes, but I'm not. So God said, let there be light, and there was light. So was there a big bang explosion then? I don't know. Could be. And there's a lot of these questions that when we get to the answer that it's really not worth it to argue over, really not worth it to get hung up on. It's got to be this way, or you have to believe this or that, because there's just so many of these questions that we don't have answers to. That's just the simple truth of the matter. Steven Weinberg, another physicist, said, in the beginning there was an explosion, not an explosion like those familiar on Earth. It was an explosion which occurred simultaneously everywhere, filling all space from the beginning, with every particle of matter rushing apart from every other particle, which really sounds kind of like an explosion on Earth to me. But those days, most cosmologists and astronomers back the theory, or rather these days, most cosmologists and astronomers back the theory that there was indeed a creation. When the physical universe burst into existence, it was an awesome explosion, popularly known as the Big Bang. So awesome in the sense of there was nothing else like it, obviously. And whether one accepts all the details or not, the essential hypothesis that there was some sort of creation seems, from the scientific point of view, compelling. And I think that even in our vernacular, we use the term creation, from the beginning of creation, or when the universe was created. Of course, I don't know that our language could really describe it any other way. I don't see any science anywhere that says it could have existed always. It had to have come into existence at some point. Now, beyond that, it gets very philosophical as to what that creation was, or who the creator was, or when it was. And a lot of this is where we're getting into the area of faith. And we're getting into the area of the evidence. Now remember, Christianity is an evidence-based faith. Webster's dictionary says faith is something believed without evidence. That's not the biblical definition of evidence. We base ours on evidence. Christians base our faith on evidence, and that's what I've said for a long time, for years, and that's what I still maintain. So next time what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at the second part of this syllogism that comprises the Kaleem argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause for its existence, and that would be our universe, and that would be anything that we can see in the physical realm. So in the meantime, it's Monday, so we will go ahead and pray for families, our immediate and extended families, their physical as well as spiritual well-being. So we thank you, Lord, for another day. We thank you for bringing us to another week, and pray, Lord, that you'll guide us through this week. Help us, Lord, to walk with you, to show others the love of Jesus through us. And we want to pray for our families. Pray for those, Lord, who are dealing with physical ailments, and help them, Lord, through those times. And pray for our spiritual struggles, Lord, for our children and spouses and family members who are maybe struggling with faith. Maybe they're not Christians yet, and we just pray, Lord, that you will help them to see the truth of the gospel, to obey it, and to live for you. We thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the forgiveness of sins through him, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So thank you for being here today. Hope everybody has a great Monday. Have a great holiday if you're taking the holiday. And I know school's letting out. Be careful in those school zones, especially, and places now where kids like to hang out. They're not going to be in school for the next couple of months. So drive safely, be on the alert, be good to yourself, and if you possibly can, be good to somebody else. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.